guy interviewed in just give you one number about how the Chinese government has been spending on the CI across the world. It's more than 2 billion. More than 2 billion. And the real number should be larger than that because there is lack of number for the first 2 years and the last year. There's no budget spent, no public number to show how much the Chinese government has been spending on this. So that 2 billion, more than 2 billion.
Yeah, I think in that question, one thing that we need to understand is the guidance on this issue is lacking, and I commend Doris explain this supporting what we need to do. I met a lot of leaders, and we speak about these things, they don't know. And these contracts are signed secretly, and there's a clause that they cannot reveal the contract to people. And of course, as if you are a student or member of the case, you can ask your authority about the clause. And in the clause, you mentioned about respect of the law, government. And we know that Chinese government right now, anything against freedom or the conservation of the community, they're trying to be here. And also, to add on, like, I really comment on the issue, and also about the contract. We know that and other speakers have mentioned as well, senior Communist Party officials such as Li Chengchun, former Politburo Standing Committee member, and CCP China's propaganda chief from 2002 to 12. And she said that, I quote, Confucius Institute is an important part of China's overseas propaganda setup. And when we speak here, like as a Tibetan, I really value and respect Chinese culture, Chinese language. And of course we need to learn it. And there's no second thought on that. But they bring those censorship here. And as a Tibetan community, we are concerned because we have faced a lot of tragedy in our country, and the oppression and repression is happening right now, as I explained before. And now these discussions are being censored here. And I think that is concerning as well. So yeah, so I feel like, as I also agree on the other speakers, like, no matter what amendment we do in the contract, it's going to be very difficult. The whole setup itself is a fault, and we need to really rethink again. And as other universities are stepping in, it is time to end the contract and then also have another space how we can teach Chinese language and culture in the United States.
Hey, so in the documentary I saw, like during lots of the footage about the protests and counter-protests regarding the CIs, I saw like a lot of the people, like a lot of the Chinese, apparently Chinese students or like Chinese American or like overseas Chinese, like waving Chinese flags and like yelling and stuff. So like, and also there was that lady from the Confucius Institute, or no, sorry, from the Overseas Chinese Association, and she said, or it was like, I forgot if it was her, but it was in her orders to like from the Chinese regime saying that they had to organize parades to whenever China's interests were being affected, or were so-called China's interests, actually the party's interests were being affected. So like so it seems like this kind of like mobilization of overseas Chinese and Chinese international students is pretty common. Has that happened here? And is that, and also how does that fit into the broader mission of the CIs?
Right. Thanks for the question. As you saw, I think on the campus, foreign university campus, along with Confucius Institute, which is a major soft power tool used by the PRC, there's another organization named Chinese Students and Scholar Association, in short CSSA. That's another organization. I believe each and every foreign university has that organization, and that organization, by and large, listens to local Chinese consulate or embassy. and it's also received funding from the Chinese consulate and embassy. For example, just last month in University of Toronto, which is the top 3 university in Canada, the Chinese students in that university protest the newly elected chair of the student union, who happens to be a Tibetan girl. And the Chinese students, through that organization, and invented an online petition and kind of bullying online, and request that new chair to be resigned or to be removed from the post just because she is pro-Tibet independence. And right now, the Toronto police is investigating this online bullying and trying to find out if the Chinese government does hide behind the Chinese students. And similar things happening in another Canadian university as well. But in America, I know in February 2017, I believe so, in University of UC San Diego in the West, there was the Holy Dalai Lama was invited to speak on campus by the Chinese students, again through that CSSA organization, protest that decision of the university. And I believe eventually the speak was cancelled. Was cancelled? No, now it's cancelled.
But under immense protest.
Yeah, immense protest. That's there's some other examples as well. So I think the foreign university is not safe while we are welcoming more and more Chinese students coming in, which in a way is good because inside China is heavily controlled and internet was policed and blocked. Chinese people have facing huge challenge accessing free information. So sending Chinese people or tourists or whoever Chinese from mainland to outside of mainland, which will provide those Chinese people an opportunity to be opened, exposed to free information. That's a good side, but the downside would be the Chinese people like myself. I was born and grown up in China, and I had my education in China, university education in China. So the propaganda and brainwashing is on daily basis. It's part of our life. Just tell you, if hear a kid singing a kid song, and then in China we sing those red song praising the Communist Party or praising the Chinese government, that's part of our life, and there's no way you escape from that. So my point is, the downside with more and more Chinese population pouring to the foreign countries would be the brainwashed Chinese, like you saw in my film, who came out to support the Confucius Institute in Toronto, would bring the propaganda with them, and they themselves, many of them themselves are living propaganda. They don't know that. They don't know that until one day they suddenly wake up. But it's not all Chinese like that. Please just make a distinction, like myself and many others who do understand the cruelty, suppressive nature of the Chinese government. They do fight against.
So I just want to say something, first of all, about how much I admire George Yixiao, because it's not as if there aren't repercussions for them. I mean, one thing you may ask yourself is, if there's all these problems, why are we having certain people who have certain issues representing, and not just academics? But one of the things you have to understand is that academics self-censor, because if you're involved in China studies in any way, it's a very uneven playing field in terms of the CCP's total control over information and who comes in and out of the country versus the way we operate in a two-party state. That has to have a certain element of nonpartisanship in relationship nation-state to nation-state. China doesn't have to have that. So our scholars on China, whether they're of Chinese descent or not, right, they have to think twice before they talk about any of these issues, because they might not get a visa to go back to China and do their research. And then the very thing that they work to get a PhD for and to write their books about, they're blocked from doing. And that's a really real thing, and it's part of why you're not hearing as much from scholars on China about this as you might otherwise think you should be.
Yes, I just have two questions. One for Ms. Liu. I think it was mentioned in your documentary that they said the Dalai Lama was a demon. Was that actually in the written materials? I'm aware that this is the 60th anniversary since the Dalai Lama left his country and lives in exile in India. Perhaps you could touch on the 3 Ts, Taiwan, Tibet, and Tiananmen Square massacre, that these are like 3 topics that are avoided. And then for Ms. Ru, do we know what the current budget is for the Confucius Institute here at PSU? And is the current contract between Hanban and Portland State University available online? I did not see it on the PSU website.
Thank you for your question. I believe that was, you saw that was a Chinese Canadian parent, right? Who was asking question to the former chair of the board. I believe she wanted to say Dalai Lama was portrayed as a demon, but to my experiences, I never saw in Chinese textbooks to say Dalai Lama was a demon, but rather than saying Dalai Lama was a separatist. Yeah, so I think that, English is her second language, just like English is my second language. So in that circumstances, she chose the, I believe chose the wrong word, but yeah.
Separatist almost equivalent to terrorist in the language that the CCP uses. So if you're a separatist, it's not that you are advocating for a different kind of political organization, it's that you're a terrorist. So those are really good questions, and I have seen the budget. I can't quote it offhand, I should have come more prepared. The budget, how much money we get from Confucius Institute. Hanban rents are a lot of space in the Carl Miller Center, so we get some money through that as well as the free classes. PSU the administration wants to draw a very hard distinction between the fact that we do not at PSU allow for credit-bearing classes paid for through Hanban and the Confucius Institute, only non-credit-bearing. My issue with that, though, is that is the issue of academic freedom and academic integrity. If you're affiliated, and I agree with the concerns that there's no safety controls for operating a Confucius Institute at a university. It would have to ultimately turn into money with no strings attached, run entirely by professors and scholars and experts hired by ourselves. And it would turn into something that could look at the Uyghur concentration camps as easily as it could look at the history of calligraphy. And that is not the situation now. We can talk about calligraphy all we want, we can't talk about the Uyghurs with the Confucius Institute. So it would have to turn into something that I don't think the party would be comfortable with, period. The way that we approached it at PSU, first of all, I'm not faculty senate, I'm union. So union recommended this resolution, Senate has passed it, I can't speak for Senate. But I do know that there's such varying degrees of knowledge about this, that to come out of the gate, especially in this truly xenophobic moment in American culture with Trump, to come out of the gate saying we want to terminate the Confucius Institutes would have been a non-starter. It would have been seen, that all of the complexity of these issues wouldn't get digested. So even though there may be something naive about hoping to renegotiate, I don't see strategically that we had any other option for pursuing opening up this conversation. No, but that's one of the stipulations of the resolution, is that it be made available. Thank you.
I want to answer another part of your question about the Tiananmen Square massacre. Because I also, like Doris Liu, I grew up in China. I was told, it happened when I was in elementary school, and I was told nobody died on Tiananmen Square, and I believed that for 10 years. Until I went to Peking University, where that was a headquarters for the student protesters. Then it's like an urban legend, right? So like people told me, okay, that's the building that we had this Tiananmen protest, and I'm like, did anyone die? Yes, of course people died. Then I realized I've been cheated for 10 years, right? And then I went to talk to the PSU CI director, the Chinese CI director, and I asked him, so do you know anyone died during the 1989 Tiananmen Square thing? And then he said, well, we don't have any evidence, or we don't know whether anyone died because we have not seen evidence of that. That's from the CI, PSU CI director. And I'm like, that's unacceptable. And I have been cheated for 10 years, and he's still sowing the seed of doubts in people's mind here on PSU campus, and I totally cannot accept that. Okay, any other questions?
So I believe that the former director of the school board, he called the mother coming to him like xenophobic, or said that the beliefs were xenophobic. And I thought that was very interesting because from what was portrayed, the institute is not wanting to share more on other like groups and practices, and don't really allow that information to be shared. So I'm wondering if the people kind of saying that those who oppose the institute are like xenophobic or anti-Chinese culture and language, if they actually believe that, or if they are again motivated by money, and if the director was possibly found of like receiving any sort of like compensation or money or personal benefit for wanting to bring the institute to Toronto.
I think xenophobia or racism or anti-China are the very convenient labels used by the Chinese government to put to anyone who is critical to the government or to the CCP regime. So some Westerners who are very close to the PRC or CCP would like to use those labels to put on anyone who's critical. Like I myself as a Chinese, how could I be racist to Chinese culture? I love people to learn my home language and culture. So I think that's my advantage to standing out, to speaking out on this issue as a Chinese myself.
So I have another question, but I also wanted to point out that I do think there was, well, you talked about the xenophobia during this era of Trump, right? There was a couple, even though you can't blame it all on xenophobia when you shut down the Confucius Institutes, right? Some of the protesters there, the costumes they were wearing and the signs they were showing were absolutely xenophobic. So a lot of the the guys that were like extermination suits with the gas masks and stuff, and that sends a signal of like we're exterminating people, isn't it? I mean, I feel like some of the visual and the language involved in the protesters wasn't a largely xenophobic. So I guess I was wondering, what's the impact of this? I mean, we can talk about it on the college campus, talk about I guess everybody in this room might have an understanding of why we don't want Confucius Institute in, say, at PSU. But when you get the mob mentality, the protest like that, and you get tons of people involved that might not have the backing, the understanding for why they're doing it, then at a certain point it does I think it does kind of claim xenophobia. But then my question would be, where can I find like resources? Like I was looking up on here what elementary schools in Portland have classes. How can I acquire like a textbook? And so I could look through it and actually see what are they teaching kids in those classes. Is there a place I can get those resources?
That's hard. I did case studies at 12 Confucius Institutes, and none of them would let me take home a textbook and have it. I mean, I think all you can do is ask. Doris, did you successfully take home a textbook?
At a very early stage, when I just visited one of the Confucius Institutes, which is very close to Toronto, I brought a Canadian black guy with me and pretend my friend was interested in learning Chinese, so the CI staff allowed us to bring a couple materials back home. Yeah, but I will say not each and every Hanban textbook contains a propaganda in it. There certainly have the propaganda materials in the books, but not each and everyone has that. And also, sorry, I wanted to add up to the xenophobia thing. The protesters I believe they were Tibetan people, the youth, and in their eyes, they thought the Confucius Institutes was like cancer, or like poison. Like they're poison people with propaganda, with censorship, all the anti-universal value thing. So that's in their eye. They're not targeting China. They're not targeting Chinese culture. They're targeting the Chinese government. So I think when we talk about China, I know for sure it's convenient to use China, but we do need to make very clear distinction between China as country, as nation, as people, Chinese people, as culture, and the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party, because that's the tricky thing that the PRC and CCP has been brainwashing people to believe all those concepts are one, China. If you criticize the PRC or Chinese government or the CCP, you criticize China. That's the purposeful brainwash.
You could also just ask PPS if you could have access to some of those materials. I think one other issue to bring up as far as it being in our schools is even if the material, even if you were to look at the material and say, well, I don't see anything anti-American or pro-communism here. One thing to also consider that I think about a lot is how many of our permanent residents and Chinese Americans who have the skills to teach Chinese are not being hired by our own school districts because we're getting this free influx of labor. Whenever you have free labor, it throws off the whole labor market. And I know people who have moved here and who are taking jobs, who are school teachers in China, who are taking jobs quite beneath them because we have such draconian rules about getting certificates or professional credentials to teach in our district, but we let the Confucius Institute, because it's free, come and without any of those things.
Hi everyone, my name is Sylvia, and I'm a board member of Apologies for Muslim Association for Public Affairs. So actually in October, just before my question, I just want to quickly share that before, so in October last year, we had the opportunity to brief with Congresswoman Bonamici with our concerns of CI, sorry, Confucius Institute. And our briefing was mainly based on the state research report by U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. And the title of this report, if anyone's interested, it's an open public report you can find online. The title of this report is China's Overseas United Front Work. It's very, very interesting. Even for me as a Taiwanese, it's eye-opening. So I encourage you to look it online if you're interested in more about the United Front Work in China. So my question is, where do we stand here in Oregon in regard of our concerns with CI in PSU? There's actually another one in the University of Oregon, or Oregon State University. There's two CI in the university here in Oregon. Like, where do we stand here in Oregon? What can we do to take actions to either end the relationship with CI, or at least to make dramatic changes to allow academic freedom and speech freedom? What can we do in Oregon to change the situation here? Thank you.
I'm the only parent of kids in PBS, and my children, with both of my daughters, went through the Mandarin Immersion program that was started very, very early by the State Department. And the difference is the State Department hires citizens, some of whom are very, very pro-China, pro-CCP, because they live here, but they would grow up in China. Some of whom aren't, right? You have the same range, because there can't be any kind of discrimination or political questions about political affiliations when our district hires people, right? So anyway, my kids with the Mandarin Immersion, what we can do, we can definitely lobby PBS, because actually that's a little bit, we have a lot of Confucius classrooms through PBS. Taiwanese parents, and of course every country, some Taiwanese are pro-China, some are really freaked out by what's going on. But the ones who are freaked out, get them to mobilize and lobby, and the Tibetans and Muslims who know what's going on in Xinjiang, to lobby PPS, because it's heartbreaking to think that you're a parent who came here and were persecuted in China, and now your kid's in the public school in America and is not being allowed to hear all the realities.
I think awareness, the very important first step to know the truth and share with people about about what you know about the issue and mobilize more people, and then eventually you can take action to plan some technical strategies to do things.
I think we have time for one last question. Is actually about Falun Gong in the documentary. I never attended Falun Gong a little bit before. So you talk about religious discrimination, and here Falun Gong we define in different ways. So did you define Falun Gong as a religion? Did you define it as a spiritual ideology? And what would you say are the ideologies, the belief systems within Falun Gong? In like the very like plain unbiased language.
Yes, of course, because the main character in the film practiced Falun Gong as well as her mother, who is still under very close watch by the Chinese authorities, and he cannot get passports. I studied Falun Gong and I did some research, and based on my research and my personal understanding, I think Falun Gong rooted deeply in the traditional Chinese culture and philosophy. Throughout 5,000 years of Chinese culture history, it's been a culture and history of self-improvement and cultivation, and Falun Gong is very in line with that philosophy and the principles of Falun Gong, truthfulness and compassion for errors, which are very good. I would bet everyone will agree with that. But unfortunately, since 1999, the movement, Falun Gong movement, has been under severe persecution by the CCP. And I believe, just from this number of people who practice Falun Gong and who are under this persecution, I would believe the Falun Gong would be the number one targeted and persecuted group community in mainland China, and a lot of horrible things and unbelievable things happen to this group. For example, Sonia's mother was put into jail for 2 years and almost lost her lives, and just for practice truthfulness, compassion, forbearance, which to me sounds really good. And some other people, I believe as many as tens of thousands, if not million, Falun Gong followers or practitioners are persecuted to death. And some are died from live organ harvesting, which is hard to believe. Which means when the practitioner is still alive, his or her organs are taken away by Chinese doctors and sell for wealthy people, Chinese or foreigners, who can afford that price to make profit.
And the European Commission found that there was evidence of that. There was enough rumors about it and everything, and then some independent group that had no affiliation looked into it and said yes.
Right, because I'm a Canadian already, and the independent investigation into this organ harvesting, like forced live organ harvesting allegations, was actually done by 2 individual Canadians. One was a long-time serving of members of parliament, who himself was a prosecutor, and another investigator was is an international human rights lawyer, and both investigators were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. So I personally believe all those investigations, and I believe the real situation would be even worse than that. Like, I taught at a Chinese university before I immigrated to Canada. I heard, while I was in China, I don't know them personally, but I heard a teacher in English literacy department or school who practiced Falun Gong were first monitored and then removed from her teaching post, which means lost income, and eventually she was tortured and injected the medicine which will destroy her nerve system or immune system. So she became kind of insane or something. And another case was a professor and who is an expert in environment, who gets award by the Chinese government as well. She practices Falun Gong and she was put into jail. That's the two people I heard of that happened in my university where I taught. And of course, while I was in the university, the persecution against the Falun Gong happened, and we as teachers in the university were all notified and requested, I would say requested by the authority to keep an eye on your own students or faculty members and report to the university authority whoever practices Falun Gong. And I know some graduate or postgraduate students were just couldn't finish their study, not because they're poor in academic study, but because they practice Falun Gong. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think Falun Gong, if you discuss from the Western standard, it could be seen as a religion, but if you look at this movement from the Eastern or Chinese angle perspective, it's not a typical religion because it doesn't have any ritual to worship or organized or name list. It's very freestyle, I would say. There's no organization among this community. Everyone is just coming to study or practice if you wish. If you don't want to, just leave. No one knows you either.
Okay, so I would like to add on the question about what we can do. I think it would be really helpful, and as I commend for taking this initiative, and mentioned before, there is a coalition of Tibetan, Chinese, Taiwanese, Uyghurs members, everyone together who are concerned, petitioning to the administration. Tibetan students actually started an online petition recently, and I think over 1,000, almost like 1,000 people already signed it, asking the Board of Trustees to consider this important issue and concerning our raising our concern. And I think every one of you here, especially who are part of the PSU family, you can also directly write to your administration and raise your concern. And some of the questions that was raised before regarding His Holiness Dalai Lama, like how Chinese communist regime attacked him, and in a very disrespectful, which every Tibetan inside and outside, we feel so pain when such things are being said. And as we know that His Holiness has been sending the message of peace and non-violence throughout the 60 years of occupation of Tibet. He was the one who guided us, believing in non-violence, fighting for our rights, and be hopeful that justice will prevail. And that's why he is respected globally. But Chinese government is attempting to undermine him. And in fact, His Holiness Dalai Lama for at least last over 30 years has been proposing the middle way approach, telling Chinese government that Tibetans can live with genuine autonomy, but his request has been denied, and furthermore, attack him and try to criticize, which has not helped on the issue of Tibet. And Chinese government is completely blamed on all the incidents that's because of their own actions. But I must remind you that as we are discussing about the Confucius Institute here, I think Confucius Institute is just a tip of the iceberg. There are so many things happening, and Tibetans have the most experience dealing with China and the Chinese Communist regime. Because of the occupation, over 1.2 Tibetan million people died. And when you see Tibetan people here, there are people whose immediate family member pass away, and even right now facing these challenges. And what we see right now, the concern in terms of the democracy, the issue that we are facing here, what Xi Jinping is trying to take the advantage of the situation. And because I'm not an expert, I'm an activist. I meet a lot of people at the forefront, like, grassroots people, activists from Taiwan, from South Asian countries, even like smaller countries whose democracies are in like struggle right now. And what Xi Jinping is trying to sell is the Chinese system is working, one-party system is working. And that is something we need to be really careful. And that really challenged the free society that we are practicing here. And Xi Jinping recently changed the constitution and now tagging himself as the leader of China, as an emperor forever. And there was a time that 20, 30 years back when the Western democracy countries trying to deal with China, and we have been telling them, it's not a new thing for Tibetans. We have been telling them over and over years that you have to be careful because we cannot trade our freedom and principle with, with the economy and the benefit with China. But nobody listened. But now what we are seeing is people are seeing things, and after dealing with China, after opening with the Chinese Communist regime, things have gone from bad to worse. So we have to think about that. Our society, free society, is under threat. It is not about the issue only about the Tibetans or the Taiwanese or Chinese people inside. It's our future of the international community. Engine, special search engine for CCP. We have to be careful on that. Because of that, there are people concerned. Even Google employees are concerned. So corporation, everyone. So I think people who believe in democracy and human rights, we should stand together. And of course, like people here in Portland and Oregon, PSU is something that is concerning, and community here haven't given our hope, Tibetans for the last 60 years. No matter how difficult situation, we will never give up our hope for freedom and justice. And the community of coalition needs your support. So with that, I want to end, and I hope that we will continue our cause together. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Academic freedom with the Confucius Institute, and I completely agree that things have gone from bad to worse. It used to be in China that there was a sense that opening up eventually and democracy was better, but that's not even the narrative anymore at all. And I have real concerns about whether you can have academic freedom